I thank the gentlelady for yielding. I'm glad that Mr. Jordan is still on the floor. Mr. Jordan, I think, put his finger on the problem. And the problem is, gee, I really like the Interior bill. It's been reached in a bipartisan fashion. It's wonderful. But by the way, the package is not perfect, because it doesn't do what I want done or what the President of the United States wants done on one specific bill, Homeland Security. My goodness, I don't know why we didn't have an opportunity to conference on that bill. You brought it to the floor on December 20th, 10 days before the end of the year. 10 days before the end of the year. If it was so important, why did we wait 11 months and 2/3 to bring it to the floor? How could we conference a bill like that? There was no time. And the reason you didn't bring it to the floor is you didn't have the votes. Mr. Jordan, Mr. Simpson, Mr. Cole, all came to this floor when we considered another bill that was what the United States Senate Republicans wanted in their bills. And so we said we need to open up this government. Mr. Graves talked about, and Mr. Jordan talked about, consensus. Graves used the word consensus. Hopefully we have a consensus on this floor. Shutting down the government of the United States is stupid, irresponsible, and dangerous. That ought to be a consensus on this floor. And if that is the consensus, as it certainly is mine, and certainly on my side of the aisle, then the cure is to open up government. We have offered 9, 10, 11 different alternatives to do that, most of which were your bills, formed in the last Congress under Republican leadership in the House and the Senate. But sadly, you won't take yes for an answer. And so you keep government shut down. Only 6 Republicans on the last vote voted to open up government. Every Democrat save 1. And that had nothing to do with opening or shutting down government. Voted to open up this government of the people and for the people. I served on the appropriations for 23 years. I never voted to shut down the government, because the government is there to serve the people, and we swear an oath to protect and preserve. Somebody's now going to say, well, they would put something in a bill and you voted against it, Hoyer, and that would have wasn't an appropriation bill. By the way, when I voted against it, passed. Madam Speaker, Mr. Speaker, Democrats have been trying to open this government since the first day of our majority, passing your bills. When I say your bills, the Republican bills, they were out of the Senate. On January 3rd, the Democratic-led House passed a package of 6 appropriation bills for fiscal year 2019 based on the language approved overwhelmingly in the Republican-controlled Senate, alongside a continuing resolution for the 7th bill funding Homeland Security, which I remind you was not brought to this floor until December 20th, 2018. What a high priority you placed on that. You were in charge for 11 months and 20 days, and you never brought it to the floor. High priority item, obviously. Senate Leader McConnell passed a bill through the Senate on a voice vote, I think unanimously, and sent it to us so government would be opened. We would have voted for it, all of us, but you didn't bring it to the floor. You brought a bill to the floor that said you wanted to do something on the wall, Why? Because the president wanted to do something with the wall. Why is the government shut down? Because the president will not allow the Congress of the United States to act to open it up. And Senator McConnell, for unknown reasons, believes that we have to have a by your leave, Mr. President, to open up this government. This is historic that we have shut down the government for this length of time. And it is unforgivable that we have put 800,000 of our fellow citizens, people who work for this government, people who help millions of people every day to get assistance they need or documents that they have to settle on a home or make sure that there's training for firefighters or any one of thousands of different critically important jobs that the federal government does. You on the Republican side of the aisle, my colleagues, have done that. You've shut down the government. We have not. Unless you think taking a hostage and demanding a ransom and having us not agree to that ransom is shutting down the government, and therefore you have to vote over and over and over and over and over again to keep the government of the people shut down. During the second week of January, we passed on an individual basis 4 appropriation bills that passed the Republican Senate last year 92-6. Is that a partisan act on our part, offering 4 bills that passed the United States Senate, which you controlled, 92-6? When I say you, the Republican Party. These are not Democratic bills we're trying to pass through with some majority we have. We took your bills. Why? Because we have a consensus. Shutting down the government is the wrong thing to do. And very frankly, I think privately, if you're asked that question, presumably most of you respond with a consensus answer. You're right, it is. We shouldn't do that. As the urgency of this shutdown grew last week, House Democrats attempted to send a continuing resolution at last year's funding levels. Now, it's important to understand last year's funding levels are the levels that were set when the Republicans were in charge of the House and the Senate, not Democratic numbers. This is not a partisan issue. This is an issue about doing the right thing, opening up the government. So we were prepared to send your bills, and you voted against your own bills. I can't understand it. And I can't understand why anybody in America doesn't understand it. We are for opening up government, and the Republicans are repeatedly and consistently voting not to open up the government. House Republicans rejected those 4 bills that were Republican bills. Next, we voted to add an amendment to reopen government through the February 8th, a short term. Give us time to talk and discuss and see if we can come to agreement. Seems to me to make sense. That's usually what short-term CRs are for. We may yet find out tomorrow whether Senate Republicans can agree to reopen government under those terms. I hope they do. In the meantime, late last week, we also brought a continuing resolution to the floor to reopen the government through February 28th. Okay, maybe we need a longer time to negotiate. Democrats have been trying to end this Trump-McConnell shutdown nonstop since taking control of this House. That work continues this week as we bring to the floor a new appropriation package. As we debated the Senate-authored versions, let me say that again, the Senate-authored versions, not our versions, of funding bills earlier this month, some of my Republican colleagues came to this floor and said that their objection to it was because it did not reflect the House position. Now, ladies and gentlemen, you've just heard Mr. Jordan talk about the Interior Bill. Presumably, if the Interior Bill were here alone, he would vote against it because it didn't have national security interests in it. On that theory, we ought to vote against 11 of the bills that we don't like individually. But you brought them as packages last time. I thought that was a good example. We're going to do it again. But the fact of the matter is, it is not because you're disagreeing with your bill. you come as the ranking member, I say to my friend, Mr. Speaker, but because of some other issue. We can all find some other issue. So, ladies and gentlemen, I think there's a consensus that shutting down the government is the wrong thing to do. And unless you believe that shutting down government is okay, you will vote yes on these bills to open up our government, the people's government, serve your constituents and the American people generally. I don't know why you keep voting no, just because the president tells you to do so. That's not what your constituents sent you here to do. Our constituents sent us here, Mr. Speaker, to serve them. The writers of the Constitution of the United States didn't say the president tells Congress what to do. They said Congress tells the president what to do. And he executes that policy. That's what separation of powers is all about. Not for Senator McConnell to say, unless the president says it's okay, I'm not going to put a bill on the floor. What kind of misreading of the Constitution of the United States is that? We are the policymakers of America. We are the ones that send to the president. Yes, he has a role, a critical role. He can veto, and we need 2/3 to override his veto. But it is not to say, Mr. President, we won't even put it on the floor for the representatives of the people of the United States to express their opinion on unless you say okay. Let's get a spine. Let's stand up. Let's act like the Article I institution we represent. Let us be independent. Let us have what democracy demands, differences of opinion argued out, not by taking hostages, not by demanding ransom, but by discussion, debate, and by votes. That's what democracy is about. And if it becomes common practice for President Trump or any other president to say to us, if I don't like what you're doing, I'm going to shut down your government. That's what's happening here. It's not just about a wall. It's about whether tomorrow the president's going to make some other demand and shut down the government. Or tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow when the president makes another demand and shuts down the government. When will it stop, my friends? Maybe never. But it will not continue with my vote. Vote for this bill. Open up the people's government. Stand up and be what America believes you are, an independent, co-equal branch of the government of the United States. Vote yes for your country and for the people you represent. And I yield back the balance of my time.